I got to be honest with you. I don't even know what a vaccine is anymore. And I'm being perfectly honest. I don't know what it is anymore. I thought we had a definition, and then it wasn't the definition. I thought that a vaccine was perfect and would prevent the disease, the ailment, but it turns out that's not really the case. You just have to take it because some big pharma company says so. To that end, I'm not the expert. Aaron Siri is. He's got a new book out. It's called Vaccines Amen, The Religion of Vaccines. Aaron, how are you? Nice to meet you.
Good. Good to meet you, Joe.
So growing up, I mean, I'm immune to smallpox for some reason, so they tried to give me the smallpox vaccine. It didn't take, but everybody was getting it. Everybody had to get that. They had to get for measles and rubella, whatever the hell that is. We know that there was a polio vaccine that stopped the polio thing that went nuts. So my entire life, I thought when you said you've got a vaccine, that prevents you from getting the ailment. And then during the pandemic times, turns out that's not true at all, right?
Yeah, I mean, most people, when they think of a vaccine, they think of something that stops transmission. So if you get the vaccine, it stops, you don't get sick, and you can't transmit that, pathogen to somebody else. The reality is actually most vaccines don't stop transmission. It's not unique to COVID vaccine. Pertussis vaccine doesn't, tetanus vaccine doesn't. The current polio vaccine for the last 25 years, called IPV, doesn't. The and meningococcal vaccine doesn't. Hep B doesn't in a school setting. So even most vaccines required for school, and I just went through more than half of them,
right,
don't prevent transmission. MMR vaccine can prevent transmission, and so can chickenpox vaccine. But those are not, So if for those who think about a vaccine as something that prevents transmission, that's not the way. That wouldn't be an incorrect way to think about a vaccine. I can tell you my definition of vaccine if you'd like to know.
No, I want your definition. That's why I have you on, because if it's not stopping the disease, preventing disease, what the hell is it?
I'll tell you my definition of vaccine. And I just need to give a little bit of backdrop so folks out there can understand it, because they may not know this. But vaccines are the only product in the entire country of every other product that you encounter, planes, cars, drugs, every single fire retardant chemical in your environment, every single product in your house, where you cannot sue the manufacturer for something called design defect claims, for the claim that the product could have been made safer. For every other product in America, literally every other product, other than vaccines, you can sue the manufacturer to claim, hey, had you made this drug safer, my kid wouldn't have died. Had you made this chemical safer, my kid wouldn't have died, wouldn't have been seriously injured. The only product you can't do that for are vaccines. Why? Because leading up to 1986, there were only 3 routine vaccines. Only 3. DTP, MMR, and OPV.
Okay.
But the amount of harm they were causing was so great that almost every company making them went out of business. There were like 6 manufacturers of measles down to 1, 6 for pertussis down to 1, 3 for polio down to 1. And when a company faces that kind of juncture, right, where your plane's falling out of the sky, where your gas tank's blowing up, where you're causing injury, what normally happens? The economic self-interest is to make a better, safer product.
Yes.
Congress, however, when it comes to vaccines, did something totally unprecedented, basically. It said, you know what? You can keep selling your product. No matter how many kids it harms, no matter how many kids it kills, we're just going to make it that they can't sue you. They passed something called the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of 1986, and that gave this unprecedented immunity to these vaccine companies. And from there, we've had the explosion in the vaccine schedule. A child following the CDC schedule in 1980s, in the early 1980s, got 3 injections, 3 by the first year of life. A child following the CDC schedule today gets 29 injections by the first year of life, 3 to 29. And every single one of those vaccines, save one, was developed by a company knowing it would never be responsible for the injuries that product causes, on the basis that it could have made the product safer. So that's a long way to get to my definition of a vaccine. My definition of a vaccine is not whether it stops transmission, some do, some don't, not any other variables that you sometimes hear about vaccines, but rather it is a product that causes so much harm that it cannot survive in the marketplace without federal government preventing people from suing the company for the harms that it causes.
It is Aaron Siri. That's a scary definition. Aaron Siri, S-I-R-I. Go to AaronSiriLLP.com. Get his book called Vaccines Amen, The Religion of Vaccines. I found Reagan to be a great president. I thought he was a very nice guy, and he cared about the American people. Why would he sign an act like that when it disincentivizes safety in a vaccine? What was the goal? From those who saw some sort of a silver lining, or this is a good thing because, what did they believe this was going to do? Because it doesn't incentivize safety at all. What does it do? What did they think it would do?
The goal wasn't to, well, the primary goal, ironically, at the time was there were so many kids that were injured and the parents needed compensation to take care of their seriously injured children. Part of this act was supposed to create a speedy way to get compensation to these families.
Okay.
Your kid's in a wheelchair, your kid's got transverse myelitis, Guillain-Barré syndrome, all kinds of neuropathies. I mean, there are all kinds of harms that vaccines can cause, not ones that the public typically thinks about. Obviously, when you experience it, you know. People always say, well, I would know if vaccines were dangerous. Really? Do you know how many drugs come off the market? Do you know which ones come off the market? Do you know what injuries they cause? Of course you don't.
No.
Until they affect you, you don't know. For the millions of folks negatively affected by the vaccines, they know. That's why they support Secretary Kennedy. That's why they, widely support all kinds of initiatives around vaccines. But putting that aside, so leading up to the 86 Act, the primary thing is they were trying to create a vehicle to provide compensation for these families a little more quickly. The pharmaceutical companies saw this opportunity. They piggybacked on it and said, well, let's also make it so we can have immunity to liability. It's what I call the original sin.
Yeah.
Congress just didn't really think about it. I know that President Reagan at the time had significant hesitations.
Right.
He understood, and I think as many people understand, the way you assure product safety is economic self-interest. Drugs, for example, most drugs are licensed based on long-term placebo-controlled trials. Why? Because the company making the drug wants to know whether it's safe before it goes on the market.
Yeah.
Because it's altruistic? No. Because it's moral? No. Because it's ethical? No. Because it wants to make sure it makes money.
Yeah.
If it puts a drug on the market that hurts a lot of people and it has to pay for those damages, it's going to lose money. But when it comes to vaccines, and read chapter 10 of my book, all cited to FDA sources, almost all childhood vaccines were licensed based on trials in which safety was reviewed for days or weeks after injection, underpowered, not enough kids, and there was never a placebo control group for a single of the routine childhood vaccines injected into children, not one of them. So, and you might say, well, why would pharmaceutical companies do that? They would do it because actually their economic incentive is to do as little clinical trial as possible. If you have been in a corporate boardroom in America, they don't make decisions based on ethics and morality. They make them based on the bottom line.
Right.
And if doing as little clinical trial work, these ridiculous clinical trials will get it licensed, that's what they'll do. The Hep B vaccine that currently is being discussed at the CDC, if anybody was watching those hearings the last 2 days, there's only 2 of them given to babies in the first year of life. One of them is called Recombavax HB. It was licensed, and this is in the FDA documentation. You can read it for yourself right today on the FDA website. It was licensed based on a clinical trial that reviewed safety, monitored safety for 5 days after injection with 147 kids in no control group. That's laughable as a clinical trial. The other Hep B had 4 days of safety monitoring. People talk about the COVID vaccine trial as anemic. Let me tell you something. If the COVID vaccine trial upsets you, this should make you incensed and outraged.
Yeah.
But why would a pharma company do it? Because they're not liable. I have no doubt before they put that thing in the arms of millions of babies, if they knew they were liable, there's no way they would let that thing go to market.
It is Aaron Siri. Get his book called Vaccines, Amen, the Religion of Vaccines. I mean, we're under the belief as the American people that these are released, therefore they're safe. I think most people don't know that you can't sue. I notice also the so-called vaccines during the pandemic were all EUA, emergency usage authorization. I think that's done now, but that's what they were, and they were pushing it. The problem I have is if the government says you have to do this, it's going to be a long, dark, deadly winter for the unvaccinated, that scares the hell out of everybody to go and get something that you're now informing us has no incentive to be safe. I mean, Aaron, is there any incentive whatsoever other than the bottom line to be safe? Because forget the bottom line. That's going to be taken care of by Biden saying you must go and get it, by your employer saying you must go and get it. Now safety's out the window too, and Big Pharma's just counting the money. Is there any incentive to actually inform the American people this has been studied properly, this has gone through the proper trials, this is safe for you? It doesn't sound like it.
If you're asking me, is there anything that's driving safety when it comes to these products? The companies are not driving safety because they have no financial incentive to do it.
Right.
The only other backstop, and it's a far weaker and far less effective backstop when it comes to product safety, can be regulators. But in this instance, the regulators are totally conflicted. When you have an agency responsible for promoting a product like the national, like the Department of Transportation
Yes.
promotes, for example, aviation. Well, but they're not responsible for safety. That's the NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board, because it's conflicting. You can't say to a same government agency, hey, go glab hand with industry, promote their product or service, and at the same time slap them for safety issues.
Right.
Same thing with atomic energy. Department of Energy promotes nuclear power plants. A different agency is responsible for safety. But when it comes to vaccines, the very same department, the Department of Health and Human Services, in which the CDC, FDA, NIH, and so forth are located, is responsible for both promoting and for safety. And so those two things are in conflict, and one of them wins out. But it actually gets worse than that. When they passed the 1986 law I mentioned earlier, they did give us an avenue of relief for, as I mentioned earlier, for those who are injured by vaccines.
Yes.
But you bring that claim against the Secretary of HHS. You are literally suing the federal health authorities. Think about that for a second. So if you're a parent and your child's injured, you can bring a claim, but it's not against the company that made the product. It's against the very federal health agency that tells you it's safe. And you got to fight against the DOJ, and it's not a court proceeding. Get no discovery. You can't depose. You can't get documents. But the important part is this. Think about how incredibly conflicted that leaves our federal health regulators.
Yeah.
They are now literally defending against claims that vaccines cause injury. So if they do a study that shows it causes any injury, what's it going to do? It's going to be used against them as an admission of interest.
Right.
So I'm not aware of a single product in this country, not one, Joe, not one, where the government defends the interests of corporate America against families, citizens that are injured by a product or a service. I can't think of a single instance except for this one.
Aaron Siri, Siri, go and get his book. It's called Vaccines, Amen, The Religion of Vaccines. Is it out now, Aaron?
Absolutely. It's available on Amazon.
Go get it right now. And again, you can go to SiriLLP.com, and it's Siri is his last name. When it comes to ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, we know that there actually were studies, 77, I think, on ivermectin, that showed that it was successful in stopping at least the symptoms of COVID-19. I had COVID. I took ivermectin. I was back on the air the next day. We know that hydroxychloroquine works in Africa. They're using it to fight malaria. And in Africa, in those countries, they had a far lesser rate of COVID than we had in the rest of the world. Is this the same thing that's going on? The manufacturers of the vaccines, the so-called vaccines, needed to make their billions or trillions of dollars. The government promoted the vaccines and at the same time lied about medicines that were far cheaper and far more effective for people. Is that why all that stuff happened? I was actually banned from Twitter for saying hydroxychloroquine works when it does. Is that whole conglomeration the one and the same? We got to protect ourselves, protect the vaccine makers, and then lie about what would actually work because it'll stop selling the vaccines for these people?
I think it's a mix of a number of things, right? There was politics involved, and those who are career officials in these federal health agencies, they don't like President Trump. They worked against him at the time, right? And so I think there was definitely some of that. They're still working against him today, including against Secretary Kennedy. Many of the career officials.
They're trying to get rid of Aaron. They want him to step down. They don't want the guy to be the guy who's in charge of HHS.
Yeah.
And is it for all the reasons that you're saying?
Absolutely. Think about the trillions of dollars of entrenched corporate interest that he is essentially putting at risk. I mean, if he is trying to, for example, if they have to go and retool and make these vaccines actually safe enough to survive on the market, meaning that they're going to have more benefit than risk,
right?
That's a lot of money spent. They don't want to do that. If they can't just get their way with these agencies as they've been able to do in the past, they're not happy about that. Look, the average American citizen, we don't have we don't have the time to go and lobby and be on top of every regulation that is passed by these agencies.
Right.
Congress passes around 200 laws a year. There are thousands of regulations passed every year, putting aside that I think they're all unconstitutional. But they're by who? By the executive branch, not the legislature, not by elected officials, but by bureaucrats. Whose has the time, money, and inclination to influence those agencies? It's the people who stand the most to gain. It's the pharmaceutical industry, the hospital associations who are making billions. They're constantly lobbying, pressing, hiring the people from those agencies. There's a revolving door and so forth. They have the time and inclination. And that's why, and this comes from the literature from Harvard and all of, very, very, I guess you call it liberal, poli-sci literature, this term called captive agency. I didn't make it up. It's in the political science literature. And that's what happens over time. And that's how, the more, even these agencies, they start as a good idea. All of government, expanding government, often starts out of some tragedy as a good idea, but they often become captive by the very industries they're supposed to regulate. So yes, to answer your question, what you saw with ivermectin, what you saw with hydrochloroquine, what you see with vaccines, what you see with these products are the result of essentially captive agencies in large part.
Well, one would think, Aaron, he's an attorney, he's an author. Go get his book called Vaccines, Amen, the Religion of Vaccines. One would think it would be rather easy to pass a regulation that says you can't go and work for a big pharma company for 10 years after you leave any agency in the government, and vice versa. If you're a big pharma, you can't go and get a job at any agency for 10 years, maybe even for life. That would stop all of this, wouldn't it?
I've proposed that many times, and I say life. Look, you want to be a public servant? Be a public servant.
Yeah.
You want to serve the people of this country? Then do that. You're in it for yourself? That's not the place for you. Okay, go to business. Go into corporate America. There's plenty of places to make money. But if you have chosen the route in life to be a public servant, then that's what you should do. I mean, from my perspective, the amount of folks in government should be drastically reduced. The few that we leave should be paid far more. Let's attract the best and the brightest into those positions. But, I have right now, literally as you and I talk, over 100 federal lawsuits against federal health agencies. As we speak right now, I have over 100 people at my law firm. About half of them do vaccine-related work. We have the largest vaccine practice in the world that doesn't represent pharmaceutical companies, and we constantly fight with these agencies. We've gotten millions of pages, literally, of documents through Freedom of Information Act requests. We have entire databases of it. I have a very good of inside view of how these agencies work. And let me tell you, they're, for the most part, from my perspective, from what I have seen, they're not really working for the American people for the most part. When it comes to vaccines, for example, they do have basically beliefs, dogmas, things they believe through repetition. They're not really carefully analyzing, the studies, the data. They have a policy objective. People think of the CDC as a science organization. They're not. They're a policy organization. They're a government organization. They set their policy, and then everything fits. Their policy is vaccines are safe and effective. You do something that complies with the policy, it's supported. It goes against the policy, you get attacked. It doesn't get published by them. It doesn't get promoted. People, it's just, it's just the way it works. So I think I've answered your question, but if I haven't, let me know.
No, you did. And I think that through your book, and we're frankly out of time, but through your book, hopefully people will get educated on this. We can make some really big sea changes, and we can all support RFK Jr. and his attempt, at least, to reform this stuff. Go get his book called Vaccines, Amen, The Religion of Vaccines. He's an attorney. He's also an author. Go to SiriLLP.com. It's Aaron Siri. Aaron, we'll do it again soon because there's a lot more I didn't get to, okay?
Would love to. Anytime.
Appreciate you. All right. We're back after this. Stay right here.